In 2011, Kenya banned the female genital mutilation. However, more than 10 years down the line, the practice is still commonplace in more than 22 counties in the country. Kenya has set a deadline of the year 2022 to eradicate this culture. Where are we in terms of progress? This week on Inside the Government, we're talking to the CEO of Anti-FGM Board, Bernadette, Loloju, and the conversation will be around what the country is doing to eradicate completely FGM in our society. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Where are we in terms of ensuring that we eradicate completely FGM practices within our communities?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. What I would want to say is that the road to ending FGM in this country started, like you have said, we have the Prohibition of FGM Act 2011 that was passed in Parliament. But before that, we had the Children's Act 2001, which had a clause on ending FGM. But now, after passing the Constitution 2010, then it was seen necessary that we have a more an act of Parliament that would make it illegal for anyone to take someone through circumcision or female genital mutilation, not only for children, as was done by the Children's Act 2001, but now it has to take care of everyone. So the Prohibition of FGM Act takes care of everyone, from 0 to 100 years or to 100 and something years. It doesn't matter, but so long as a woman is alive. So the road has been treacherous because we know that it's a cultural practice, that our communities have believed that it's their way of life, it's their way of doing things. But one thing for sure is that FGM is a gender-based violence, one of the worst. It's even the worst form of gender-based violence meted on women and girls. But Kenya has made progress. Kenya has put laws and policies and strategies in place. And so what I can say is that we might not be at 0 as of now, but we are heading to the 0 that we are looking for.
You see, the United Nations has set aside, the year 2030 as the deadline for global countries to eradicate FGM. In this country, we have become more ambitious. We are talking about the year 2022 by December this year, actually. Are we likely to meet that deadline?
What I can say is that, when we say 0, we don't mean that the 21%, which is the Kenya Demographic Health Survey for women and girls between the age of 15 to 49, has been put. But we are talking about 0 new cases of FGM, which as of now, as we speak now, we have seen that we have had a number of issues or a number of girls who have still gone through FGM, because we do a 6-month report. Every 6 months we have a report that we do to the president that shows the progress we are making. And what we have seen in our last report, which is the 4th report that we did in December, is that the number of FGM cases being reported is going downwards. But one thing for sure is that FGM is still going on. And we saw it clearly in December when we saw a number of girls being taken through FGM at the border of Kenya and Tanzania among the Kuria community. But one thing we saw also is a change of tactic, because now we have the cross-border issue where girls are taken to Tanzania, or sometimes girls are brought to Kenya. We have also seen that the community is changing tactic. No more celebration when girls go through FGM. And even the Kuria community that have been parading girls on the roads, the people who are being paraded on the roads this time were the boys, because the boys are also paraded on the roads. But the girls were being done for in the dark. But what I want to report is that the government took decisive action, because we have a number of court cases ongoing, and we also have some that have already been taken, some people are already in prison for taking their girls through FGM. So that means that the government has sent a very, very serious message to our communities that FGM is against the law and FGM should not be allowed in our communities. But the question is the law enough in ending FGM? And that is why we are here. The Anti-FGM Board, what we have done is that we have come up with what we call community dialogue guidelines, because we felt that the community needs to be told, they need to be created for awareness, to be told why. Why are we saying that FGM should end? Because FGM is a human rights violation. So Why should you take your child at night? Why should you use so much effort to take your girl to Tanzania or to Uganda or to Somalia to cut that child, or to bring your child all the way from the US or UK to cut her in Kenya under the darkness? And the love you have for that daughter is more than FGM. When I was growing up, FGM was normalized. It was like it is the fashion in the village. It's something that we had to go through. But today, nobody wants even anybody to know that they went through FGM. Everybody wants is to be hush hush. You know, girls, when I go to speak in universities or in colleges, they come to me and say, Madam, I'm a survivor. But I wouldn't want anyone else in my circle of friends to know that I'm a survivor. That means even as we make the effort, it will take the families and communities and villages to stop it, because they are the owners of the girls.
When it comes to matters religious, and cultural practices, I mean, sometimes it becomes very hard, to deal with this crisis. And so, what are you doing in the 22 counties where FGM is prevalent?
Yeah, so what we have done is that each county has, or each community has their way of doing things, and they have the reasons why they do FGM. Like, I can say that if we map out communities like the Maasai, the Samburu, the Pokot, the Elgeyo Marakwet, girls are cut when they are a bit older, like 13, 14, 15, because it was believed that it is a rite of passage, that when you have to be cut before you get married. So when you look at that, then you have to we came up with programs in those communities that can work for them, like alternative rites of passage, where girls are taken through 3 or 4 days training to be made to understand their bodies and to understand why they should say no to FGM. But we also saw that ARPs might not be working like 100%, because we call the girls, we talk to the girls, but when they go back home, they find their parents at home waiting for them to cut them. So we said we have to bring together both alternative rite of passage and the community dialogue. So we need the mothers and the fathers to be convinced that the girls don't need to go through FGM. Then we bring the girls also for them not to feel like their friends are putting so much pressure on them to go through female genital mutilation. And then when you look at the northeastern counties, the girls are not going through FGM because it's a rite of passage. They go through FGM when they're 5, 6, or 7 years old. So they even never, they can really, when you talk to most of these women who are survivors, they can remember clearly what happened to them, even when they were 7, even when they were 6. They can remember clearly what happened to them. But for them, according to what we have been told, and according to what we have researched, and according to what we have sat down with the religious leaders to understand, is that they believe that it is a religious requirement. But the question is, there are so many other tribes who are Muslims, but they do not practice FGM. So the question is, are you doing it because it's an Islamic requirement, or are you doing it because it's a cultural practice for the Somali community, which now is at 94%, according to the Kenya Demographic Health Survey 2014, 94%. But you have other Muslims coming from the coast who are not practicing FGM. So does it mean, is it a religious requirement or is it a cultural practice? So that is a discussion we are continuing to have with the religious leaders, and it's coming out clearly that it is not a religious requirement.
When you talk to community leaders, and families, who is more receptive towards, the zero tolerance of FGM? Is it women? Is it men? Is it children? Who is more receptive?
Those who are more receptive are the girls themselves. If girls were given a choice, they would never choose FGM. So we have the girls who are growing up between the age of, let's say, those we can reach out to or who can understand what we are telling them, are girls between the age of 9 to 15. Then we have the age between 16 to 25. So we are now engaging the young girls and boys in primary and secondary school, but we are also engaging young people who are out of university. And now what we are doing also is that we are bringing on board the university students and the college students, because we believe these are the mothers of tomorrow, they are the fathers of tomorrow. So first of all, even as we accelerate ending FGM for this generation, but we want the next generation of women and girls to be making a decision not to take their own daughters through the cut. For example, myself, I'm a survivor of FGM. I went through it when I was 13. As I had told you earlier, when we were growing up, we thought it was the normal thing. It was the fashion in the village. We never knew anything beyond our village. But later in life, that's when we realized that our human rights were violated. Because when we came out and found other girls from other communities, they did not go through FGM themselves. And so when we came out, that's when we realized, oh my God, you mean it's not an in thing? It's only happens in my community. Then now when I grew up and I got my own daughter, my daughter is now safe because she just hears about FGM because I campaign against this. She also becomes one of my champions who is advocating for less FGM. The same with my boys. My boys also are advocates against FGM. So now I am a mother who is an advocate. My daughter is an advocate. My sons are advocates. So we will not see that FGM going on in our family. So we have cut that generational trauma. So what we are looking at is making sure that women, especially those who have been cut themselves, that will not pass that to their own daughters. And the moment we do that, then it will just happen so automatically that we get to zero. Because if I decide not to cut my daughter, another woman who is a survivor will not cut their daughter. Because when we look at our statistics, we have 4 million women and girls between the age of 15 to 49 who have been cut. So you can imagine each of us, who has already had children, maybe between the age of 30 to 49, if each of us has 2 or 1 daughter, if we decide, all of us, that we will save our daughters from FGM, automatically we get to zero.
Fighting FGM has not been easy, not only here in Kenya, but all over the world,
Yes.
from Asia to Europe. But now came the COVID-19 pandemic. What has it done to the fight against FGM?
So here we come with the COVID-19 pandemic, which happened in the first time we had the close down was in March 2020. And I remember it was just a few days to closing of schools, and schools were closed indefinitely. All of us were scared. All of us did not know what the future held for us. And at that time, I remember the Samburu community was going through male circumcision. And girls found themselves at home. And everybody thought we are not going back to normal. Everything became abnormal. And I remember we started getting reports of girls being at risk and some going through the cut. And we immediately, even with the fear of COVID, I remember we left our homes and we now started, going out and monitoring the situation and making sure that girls were safe and running messages on TV and on radio. And then between March to December, we were all over. It was a roller coaster. It was, we exposed ourselves without thinking about whether we would get COVID or not, but we said we have to move and make sure that the girls were safe. So later, that when we were doing our analysis, we realized that girls are safer in school. Girls are safer in school. If girls remain in school, then we should be assured that these girls will not go through FGM. They will be safer from child marriage, and they'll be safer from teenage pregnancies. Because I remember we had an outburst, teenage pregnancies by the time we were going into 2021 was like the norm. In every school you went, you would find 40 to 45 girls were pregnant, especially in high school. And some had even dropped out of school and gotten married. So with the issue of the policy, the government policy of having children in school, 100% retention, and then again 100% transition, I think that's another strategy which has really helped us to keep girls in school. But I can assure you COVID really was a big challenge for us. And I'm praying that we never get to a situation like that again.
Did you see a spike in the number of women who are undergoing the cut?
I wouldn't say it's a spike, but it's something that happened because every time there's a holiday, then there's that kind of, we always get prepared for anything. Like now, when children are at home, I can assure you they are more at risk. You can't imagine. A child is at risk more at home than when they're in boarding school. So the issue of FGM is just to convince the communities that their children are more at risk when they go through FGM, or it's a negative kind of a thing to do to their daughters. But since it's a gender inequality issue, that's where the voices of the men come in. Because now we have to bring men on board. The conversation now has to involve men. Because at the beginning, when we started this campaign, we were focusing on the girls alone. We started with the girls alone through training them and telling them to say no. Then we came to realize that even when the girls say no, then the family is involved in this matter. So we brought their mothers on board. Then we realized also the mothers are not the owners of the power at home. The owner of the power at home is the father. So now we have started also bringing on board the fathers. We have brought in the gatekeepers of culture, who are the elders of the community and the religious leaders in some of these communities. So now what we have done is to come up with a package which is a multi-sectoral kind of approach.
Out of the 22 counties where FGM is practiced in Kenya, which counties would you see you have registered the most progress, and which are the other counties where you're facing significant challenges?
When I look at the counties, I can say Narok County has made a lot of progress, Kajiado, because I think when the campaign started, people focused more on these communities, the Maasai community, the Samburu community. People felt like they're the ones who were having the highest FGM. But at the same time, the reason why the focus was not so much on the northeastern part of the country was most of the time the insecurity and the fact that most organizations that were doing anti-FGM campaigns could not move to that region because maybe of the insecurity. You know, sometimes they give insecurity and say insecurity is a reason why we are not going to that region. But what I can say is that also it depended on the community, how they are welcoming. You know, sometimes you also look at where people will welcome you and they'll be ready for you to give them messages. And I think the focus was more on the Narok, Kajiado counties. Those are the counties that at the moment have really had significant progress in terms of the community themselves accepting that they should end FGM.
Talking about prevalence, look, you know, in the last 30 years, you know, the prevalence of FGM in this country has dropped from a high of 37.8% in 1989 to around 21% that we keep on talking about. The question is, do you believe that we're on the path of eradicating FGM, the 21% prevalence, in the next 9 years?
Very much on progress. In fact, Kenya is one of the leading countries in Africa and even in the world in the campaign to end FGM. The only country where a president has given his commitment to end FGM. And a country that is very progressive, because I have traveled. This is a country, even when we go to those international forums, Kenya is making the greatest progress to bring FGM down to zero. But one of the issues that is affecting us is that we are bordering the 4 countries that also have one of the highest FGM prevalence. We have Somalia at 99%. Then we have Ethiopia at around 80-something%, which are countries that are bordering us. Okay, we have Tanzania, which is 11%. That is not, that's on the lower side. But we have the Kuria community and the Maasai community who border Tanzania, and that's where exactly where that belt between Kajiado, Narok, and the Kuria communities, a very long belt where we have FGM practicing communities. Then we have 0.3% for Uganda, but now it's Kenya that is more prevalent on the Pokot side than on the Ugandan side.
And you have a lot of cross-border trade and cross-border visitations. So you have a situation whereby Somalis on the Kenyan side are sending their girls to Somalia to go through the FGM, and then they come back into the Kenyan society. How are you going to deal with that challenge?
So what we have done is that in 2019, our minister, Professor Kobia, organized for a meeting with the ministers of the region, the gender ministers of the region, that is Kenya, Somalia, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. And the ministers came, they accepted her invitation, and they came to agree on how do we deal with the cross-border issue. And we had the first declaration signed by the ministers in April 2019. Then from there, the ministers guided the technical team to come up with a costed action plan on how to end cross-border FGM, which we did, and we presented to the ministers in November last year. That's November 2021. Then the ministers approved the costed action plan to be implemented. Then we had the second meeting of the ministers in Uganda, where we were hosted by the Minister of Uganda. So we went there, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Somalia, the same countries. And they were able to reconfirm their commitment to end FGM through the Mombasa Declaration, reconfirming the Mombasa Declaration. Then they went ahead to tell us, as the different countries, to go ahead and implement the cross-border FGM, a cross-border action plan, which we are in the process because it needs finances. So what we are doing is fundraising from our development partners and also see what we can contribute ourselves. So Kenya is the country that has all these other countries in their borders.
You are talking about resources that are needed, to deal with cross-border issues. What budget are you talking about?
I can't really give you the budget in itself, but it's quite a big amount of money that is needed to run that action plan. And I feel that we might not be able to raise as much as we would want, because for the cross-border issue, each country has to take care of their own budget in terms of taking care of that. So you see, the budget that will be needed more is for the Kenya team to have more money to deal with the cross-border issue. So this one, we are raising it with our UN partners just to see how they can support the cross-border issue.
And talking about the budget, this financial year, you've been allocated 102 million shillings to fund your operations. And this is barely enough. I mean, when you factor in, you have operational cost, you have development cost. How are you going to manage, or how are you planning to manage with such small resources?
So for the last 3 years, that has been our budget. It has not increased. So what we have done is that we have been able to work closely with our development partners, and we have UNICEF and UNFPA have been able to support some of our programs. We also have other organizations that are working in this space, like AMREF, Equality Now, Plan International, World Vision. All these organizations are working in this space, and others that are working at community level, putting also resources, because they are using the same policy, like they're implementing our policy, the policy that we have come up as government, the strategies that we are using, and the presidential acceleration plan, which is also costed, that we also are implementing with our partners to make sure that we reach our communities as much as possible. But what we have also done is that we have put in place the committees at the county level. So we have the county anti-FGM steering committees, which have a multi-sectoral kind of approach. And so in these committees, we have some of our donors sitting in these committees. But we have some counties where we don't have anybody who is funding anything. And so that's where now the Anti-FGM board comes in to make sure that we fill that gap.
You have almost 50 NGOs, in Kenya that are helping in the fight against, FGM. So how do you ensure that with such a diverse number of civil society organizations, that your operations are coordinated?
Yeah, that's why we have the county anti-FGM steering committees, which are chaired by the county commissioners. So the county commissioner has to know every NGO that is within that county and is working in the anti-FGM space. So this NGO has to be part of the county anti-FGM steering committee. And if they are working at the sub-county level, then they have to be part of this sub-county anti-FGM steering committee, which is chaired by the deputy county commissioner. So from there, then the whole coordination comes up. Then at this level, we have the anti-FGM board, but even with the anti-FGM board in place, we have the multi-agency technical committee. And at this level, the multi-agency technical committee is made up of 10 ministries, departments, and agencies. And the anti-FGM board is the one that is coordinating, but it is chaired by our PS, who is PA State Department for Gender, just to make sure that all of us are coordinated and are able to all work towards ending FGM.
Before I come to the end of this interview, you're talking about medicalized FGM,
yes,
or CAT. And just the other day, there was a ruling by the High Court that stayed the ban on FGM in this country. And the fact that, the person who was challenging the ban on FGM is a medical doctor. How did that make you feel?
And not only a medical doctor, but a woman. Yes, so obviously it was shocking, and we felt that it was not like we wondered. But even I think for her, at some point, she felt that when the women survivors started speaking and started saying what they've gone through, I think at some point she also felt that no woman should go through FGM. So what I can say is that there need to be a lot of awareness creation, and especially from the mouths of women who are suffering, because it's the woman who knows. The woman who has gone through FGM is the one who knows where the pain is. And FGM, when you go through circumcision, even if you're 3 girls or 4 of you, none of you is cut the same, because there is no measurement. There is no guideline to tell the person who is cutting, cut this much, or cut here, don't cut here. Measure, this is, people are just doing guesswork. People are just cutting. Someone is just cutting because the grandmother told them this is how it's cut. They will also start practicing, So you are practicing, you are not a trained person, but you are practicing on a human being cutting their private parts.
Loloju, finally, what do we need to do to win the war against female genital mutilation in this country?
We have to continue speaking about it. We have to help the women to raise their voices. And I'm telling you, the voices of women are getting raised. I came from Wajir this morning because that's where we had the Religious Leaders Conference. The women who are survivors were speaking with a lot of bitterness. And they didn't care who was seated there. They just wanted to pass the message that we are suffering and we don't want the suffering anymore. So it is to make sure that we continue. Because even a river, when it hits a rock and continues hitting a rock, the rock will break. So we will continue. We will not tire. We will talk. And now the campaign is in the right hands, because it's on the hands of a woman who has suffered the consequences. So for the girls who are behind, we are going to save them. I just want to urge women who have gone through female genital mutilation, do not pass that trauma to your daughter. Leave your daughter alone. I want to talk to the fathers. If you are a father listening to me, get involved in the life of your daughter, and you are from the community that cuts, from today go and ask and tell your wife not to dare touch your daughter, because the voice of men is very important. Men are the leaders. Take your leadership positions. Don't tell us you are not the ones who cut girls. Take your leadership position.
And on that passionate plea, we come to the end of this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane, for your time.
Yes, thank you.
We've been talking to Bernadette Loloju, the CEO of Anti-FGM Board, on what the board is doing to help Kenya win the war against FGM. You have heard it from her. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you very much indeed for your time. This has been Inside Government. We'll do this again on Friday next week. Until then, enjoy your afternoon.